Hey guys, how's it going? Josh here, and today we're going to talk about King Ghidorah's origins. With King Ghidorah, there's been a few different types of origins, some which are very simple, and others that are very complicated and maybe a little too convoluted for their own good. I guess going from simplest to most complex, the most simplest of origins is simply that King Ghidorah is more or less a space dragon from far out in space. And I personally do believe this will be the implemented origin for King Ghidorah in this upcoming movie, simply because we know that we find King Ghidorah frozen in Antarctica, and then obviously King Ghidorah gets out of its frozen entombment, wreaks havoc, and does all that stuff. So I feel like we will get the hint that King Ghidorah is from space, but besides that, nothing more. That's probably a good thing. You know, you don't want to make things too complicated too early. This gives future directors, future writers, future producers of the Godzilla franchise a lot of freedoms for what they can do, because another origin is that King Ghidorah is from Venus. This actually goes into the more convoluted origin, but there's two types of the Venus origin. There's one where King Ghidorah is from Venus, and another where King Ghidorah erases the civilization that is on Venus. I'm kind of curious if that would even be worth doing for this movie, because at a certain point, if you're going to say King Ghidorah is from Venus, you might as well just say King Ghidorah is just from space. The other really complicated origin basically goes that King Ghidorah's remains are on Venus and are found by these beings called Futurians. And these Futurians basically use King Ghidorah's remains to make genetically modified beings called Dorats. Now, you could think of a Dorat as basically a cat to a lion being King Ghidorah and a house cat being Dorats. So they're basically just little house pets made from King Ghidorah's remains. In this future time, the Futurians go back in time to the 1940s when the nuclear test happens that makes Godzilla Godzilla. After this happens, the Futurians, they go back to where they came from, but they leave the Dorats behind. And because the Dorats are left behind, they're exposed to an H-bomb test in the 1950s, which irradiates them, merges them, and gives birth to the being that is King Ghidorah. All in all, it's really interesting origin. I definitely am not a fan of this origin, just because it is so complicated for no good reason. I guess to explain the Futurians, a simple way of explaining them is basically they are people from the 23rd century. They're humans, technically. It's more or less a political organization on Earth called the Equal Environment of Earth Union. Now, the goal of the Futurians is pretty much to equal all power amongst all countries on Earth, creating kind of a balance of sorts. But in the 23rd century, Japan is the most powerful nation, which makes sense considering, who makes the Godzilla movies during this time period. So the Earth Union, which is basically a dramatic version of the United Nations, doesn't really control much regarding Japan stuff. So basically, how does the Futurians and the Dorats really come together? Well, the Dorats were left there. I mentioned that earlier, but they were left there because the Futurians were hoping that with the H-bomb test going on near them, it would mutate the Dorats so they could be used to attack Japan before Japan becomes this superpower. Things will go exactly as expected, because instead of getting 3 different mutated monsters, they just get King Ghidorah. But since King Ghidorah comes from those Dorats that the Futurians made, they're able to control King Ghidorah to still attack Japan. It's really, like I said before, a convoluted origin. I definitely don't want them to do this just because it's a little too much. I think it's just more complicated than really needs to be. Comment below your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think? Would you like to see the Dorat version and the Futurians and all that stuff? Would you like to see that version of King Ghidorah's origins, or do you just want a simpler version of King Ghidorah comes from space? So comment below your guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys later.